there, this is episode 88 of the first 10 minutes. I'm Tony Parmeter.
I'm Steve Halliwell.
And I'm Aaron Williams.
And this is a video games podcast where we play the first 10 minutes of a video game. Then we sit down here to discuss how well that game communicates itself to the player, both in terms of what the game is about and how to play the game. And in response to our latest listener poll, which you can find at the first 10 minutes on Twitter, you, the listeners, voted for us to play Pyre. I played Pyre. Gentlemen, would you like to hear all about it?
Yes.
How convenient. So this is Pyre, spelt Pyre. Would you like to start with some Steam tags, or would you like to start with some Wikipedia?
I like to finish with the Steam tags.
Yeah, finish with the Steam tags. They have a good finish.
All right. Steve, I don't know if you recall from last week, but I am going to hold you to my cursory Googling indicates.
Don't worry. Yep, go for it.
Yeah, you're all prepped and ready, are you?
Yeah.
Excellent. So if we're going to start with the Steam tags second, sorry, my laptop has just done a whoopsie. Just bear with me for a moment. No, it's fine. It's fine. As long as the audio is still recording, we're all good.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
According to Wikipedia, Pyre is an action role-playing sports video game developed by Supergiant Games for Microsoft Windows and PlayStation 4 and was released on July the 25th, 2017. Still piping hot from the oven.
Yep.
This particular game. Now, in terms of Steam tags, we have a whole bunch of them.
It's a strong
and right
start.
Right at the very top of the list is great soundtrack.
Good to know.
Popular favorite. So it is a great soundtrack,
solid.
indie RPG, story-rich sports, visual novel, atmospheric, action, hand-drawn, single-player, fantasy, party-based RPG, adventure, local multiplayer game.
I love multiplayer.
I gotta love that local multiplayers.
Yeah,
It's the best kind of local multiplayer.
Yeah.
Now
when it's multiplayer.
The one that I
multiplayer game, I'm just a man in a red hat running around jumping on mushrooms.
the one that I'm surprised isn't closer to the top of the list there is sports. And
Well, that's the one that jumped out at me when you were explaining the Wikipedia page, Tony. Because
Yes.
I should probably confess here, I know very little to nothing about this game. So my mind's kind of reeling right now, trying to imagine what the fuck this looks like.
well, it looks
Which
like
is exciting. That's a good thing. That's a great thing for video games. What does this look like?
Let me
help you.
Let me help you out, Aaron. It looks like a video game.
Yeah. It's like
Sure.
a video game,
moving
last
on.
video
Yeah.
game.
It's a
I'm with you.
My cursory Googling would reveal that a pyre is a heap of combustible material, especially one for burning a corpse as part of a funeral ceremony.
So it's something that could blow up at any moment. That seems about right for what you described for this game.
right. Shall I start?
No shade. I mean no shade with that. I'm just saying I'm thrown right now. I'm wondering if I myself am not about to combust.
Right. Shall we get to the 10 minutes now, or shall we do it later?
Nah.
Dad joke. Chalk it up, gentlemen.
Yep, that's one and only.
Now I can relax. All I have to do is unpack this rather complex experience. All right, strap yourselves in. We're doing this. It starts with the main menu.
Game changer.
Pause for effect.
Yeah, well, okay.
And I hit start campaign. Now, the visual style of this game, for anyone who has played anything by Supergiant previously, be that Bastion or Transistor, if you are not familiar with the visual art style of those games, then me saying it looks just as good and impressive and stylized and colorful and contrasty and amazing as those two games doesn't really help you very much.
Beyond being good.
If I try to explain visuals that are this rich and complex in words, it's kind of like trying to explain, I guess, like the Mona Lisa by talking about brushstrokes. It doesn't actually convey the totality of what's going on here. But let's just say, as somebody who, for my own tastes, is hugely appreciative of color, this game has just oodles of it everywhere,
all the colors,
all the time, and it's very, very nice. This includes.
It's
go on.
It's good application of color too.
Yep.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that where it's not just pure rainbow vomit. It's carefully selected rainbow vomit.
Yes, and there are moments as well where there are a lot of very different colours being used, but the distinct forms and locations on the screen where they're being used. I guess much similar to Bastion, where you could have highly vibrant and very different tile sets in the world. But together, even though there's a whole bunch of colour on screen, it does work. There is a consistent aesthetic at play. I'm using one version of the meaning of aesthetic there. the visual one. Okay, so I select Start Campaign from the main menu, and I'm then very, very quickly taken immediately into the actual game playing back. So we're kind of looking at a perfectly sort of symmetrical framing where the camera looks like it's in a dark canyon and it's looking out to a desert vista with sand dunes and what have you. The camera is very, very slowly dollying down. And as it does this, the emblem and the logo for the game, Pyre, appears on the screen. It kind of burns in like it expects if something was kind of being burned onto parchment. This includes a distinctive moon crescent and also almost a pentagram, kind of the five-pointed star, but with one of the arms of it sort of folded upwards, so it's kind of pointing up like a chimney. Out of this pentagram shape. It's very distinctive. Another way of describing it might be, imagine the kind of arrow that you see on a mini-map if you're indicating where the player is, kind of like a pointed arrow with two tails, kind of off an arrowhead with two tails off the back of it, with the letter N kind of drawn over the top of it. If neither of those two descriptions do it for you, then I would also recommend some cursory Googling. In the mode of what Steve has been doing. Now, this stays on the screen for several seconds because I didn't realize that the game wanted me to press a button, because it doesn't actually tell me to press a button. But after it kind of held there for a little while, and I went, "Oh wait, it's my turn." I tapped the A button on my 360 controller that's plugged into my PC, and the logo burns away again. The camera then sort of resumes dollying down at a faster rate down this canyon, and very soon I see a trundling wagon come through, kind of out behind all of these. They could be rib cages, or they could just be literal cages. And it sort of rumbles off into the center frame of the midground of the desert in the background and pulls to a halt. Now, this thing is animated with a capital A. This thing is, look, if I'm going to name drop, I'm going to say Miyazaki-esque.
Okay.
In terms of the way that it's trundling through the landscape and the way that its wheels are ricketing and rolling, and the stretch and squash and the different components kind of squidging together as the thing pulls to a halt. After this happens, I then get a virtual cursor appear on the screen and a scroll banner across the bottom. Looks like a sort of a roll of parchment. And now I'm going to do a whole bunch of reading. There is a lot of reading to be had here, gentlemen. It says, it says, your days in the downside brought slow, lonesome agony. Now, as you lie yielding to the elements, something rumbles into view. 3 shapes emerge, each clad in strange attire. This is all in black text, except for the word downside, which is capital D, which is in orange. So I put my virtual cursor over the top of it, and I get a little tooltip window that's kind of like a little bit more detail about this proper noun. Downside, a vast purgatory into which the Commonwealth casts its convicts and its enemies. None have been known to return from the forsaken land. Now, immediately after I have cursored over this only word on screen that is a different colour, I then get a button, kind of like a little button logo appears in the center bottom of the parchment, which wasn't there before. I put my virtual cursor over it, and another tooltip tells me continue, interact, or press X anywhere to continue. So this has taught me 2 things without actually telling me exactly how to proceed. It's given me one piece of text on screen that is different from the rest. As soon as I cursor over it, it tells me that these tooltips to add a little bit more information exist. Mm-hmm. And then it adds a button to screen that I then cursor over because it's just appeared that also tells me how to proceed through dialogues. I can't overstate how much dialogue there is here, so when you get sick of it, if you don't want to hear me reading anymore, please let me know.
How many minutes are we talking here?
I mean, there's 10 minutes.
Of you reading people speak Swedish?
I played the game for 10 minutes.
Let's stop right here then.
All right. So when I press to continue, I then get a cameo, a large piece of art of a character appear on screen. They are quite sizable. They're taking up almost the entire right-hand third of the screen. Kind of the background scene of the canyon and the desert is slightly blurry, and the art of this character, it's static, but it's very crisp and it's very bright. They are wearing like a blue and orange set of robes. They got a big sort of grey-green neck shawl and an enormous skulled head with giant horns coming out of either side, sort of curling down and around. And then the next piece of dialogue on the parchment is in quotations and says, another piece of filth expelled from the Commonwealth. And in the top right-hand corner of the parchment, it says, masked woman. Also, while I'm reading this, I can hear a voice speaking, but the speaking voice, although it is using words and tones and intonations, it's not in any language that I recognise. But clearly this is the voice of the character speaking. I put the cursor over Commonwealth because it is also capitalised and in a different colour, and it tells me, Commonwealth, a proud country risen from the ashes of a fallen empire, home to a multitude of ethnic groups, founded on principles of mercy and kinship, whose exact meanings evolved through many centuries. So these are little bite-sized pieces of world building, and they're also voluntary pieces of world building. I can get a lot from seeing capitalised words in a different colour, saying downside, Commonwealth. These are clearly what I guess it's the benefit that you don't get when you're reading a novel, where you can be drowning in proper nouns in say a fantasy or a science fiction novel. There's a lot fewer of them in these particular snippets of dialogue, but it's also emphasising the ones that I should, air quotes, care about.
Seems like it's almost the equivalent of an annotated novel, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, one of the Steam tags for this was visual novel, and this is certainly certainly in that style and those particular elements. So when I hit to continue, another cameo of another character, far smaller, but in a similar kind of style, same coloured neck shawl, same colours on the robes, also kind of like a skull piece, but this is almost like it doesn't look as menacing as a xenomorph, but it does have the big sort of Triceratops style kind of spike crest coming out the back of it.
Cool.
A different sounding voice speaking as I read the text on the screen that says, see, right on schedule. Do you prefer schedule or schedule? Just that's for the two of you.
Schedule.
Oh. I prefer schedule.
Schedule, all right. Yeah, see, right on schedule. What did I tell you? And the name tag for this one is masked ... something. Also, when this character appeared, the giant double horn character is still on screen, but their cameo has faded significantly. So I can still clearly make them out, but the brightly lit one is the one who's speaking. So on the left.
So these are more of those. Sorry, Steve, what were you saying?
Is it faded like it's transparent or faded like it's no longer in a spotlight?
It's no longer in a spotlight. Yep.
Okay.
Still completely opaque.
So that's very much visual novel.
Yes.
Visual novel aesthetics coming into play there.
The masked woman then speaks again, and this little kind of sub-window heading that's telling me who the character is, it slides across the top of the dialogue panel as the two different character cameos fade in and out. So it's giving me a lot of different ways of indicating to me that the emphasis of who's speaking has changed.
Yep.
And the masked woman continues and says, you told us we would find someone alive. The masked creature then says, someday. I said we'd find someone alive someday. Just not today, I guess. But don't be glum. You know I see you frowning underneath that mask. Now, I really like this line because it indicates, without being kind of overt in third-person mode, that these characters are not skull beings, that they are, in fact, wearing costumes.
Yeah.
A third character then appears. They kind of push in front of this masked creature on the left of screen. The masked creature kind of fades and goes back behind this character. So the character who's speaking on the left is now in front. Again, similar coloured neck shawl, same colours on the robes, and a different kind of skull piece. This one is more like a masquerade ball mask with a giant crest heading directly upwards off of the top of the face. And he is referred to as Masked Man. The Masked Man says, looks like he's breathing. All of this text is in orange, much like the proper nouns from earlier. Pardon me. Mm-hmm. So just in case I didn't make it clear as well, all of these characters are voiced and they all have different voices.
But they're all doing...
But they're all speaking the same form of not English.
Yep.
It doesn't sound... I mean, I'm not knowledgeable in all the tongues of humankind, but it doesn't sound to me like an air quotes real world language. I'm assuming that this is something the equivalent of Simlish.
Sure.
Okay. So I cursor over, it looks like he's breathing. And the tooltip that appears says, looks like he's breathing. The masked wanderers presume you are male. Interact to change this. So I press the A button over this text, and when I tap it once, it changes to looks like she's breathing. The masked wanderers presume you are female. And then looks like they're breathing. The masked wanderers presume nothing about your gender.
Okay.
I toggle through all of them again to see that there are 3 of them, and yes, they are. And I leave it on, looks like they're breathing. The masked wanderers presume nothing about your gender.
Right on.
Now, I kind of want to dig right into why I did this at this particular moment. I identify as male, but in this game, I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing there. And as this 10 minutes continues, there's a lot of interesting stuff here about who exactly am I supposed to be.
Right.
So because I had no clue as to my identity within the game, I went with looks like they're breathing. So after I've selected this, I continue through the dialogue, and the masked woman continues and says, it seems they still are. Then stand aside. I shall send them to a better place. The masked creature says, a better place? Name me a single better place than this. The masked man says, hang on. The markings on their rags, I think they're one of them. But look at them, they're beyond our help and we are beyond theirs, says the masked woman. And the masked creature says, broken, shaking, starving, probably diseased. Yeah, good luck with that there, chum. See you back at the wagon. So purely through the way that these 3 are talking to one another, I've already got the impression that the smallest of them, the masked creature, is a bit of a jokester, kind of the more flippant, lighthearted one. The large, sort of solid-looking woman who's on the right of screen, taking up as much screen space as the other 2 put together, seems very grim and sort of all about getting the job done and business as usual. And the man's sort of somewhere in the middle of those 2 things. The masked woman says, indeed, the day grows dim. You have at best an hour. The creature and the woman both fade out, and it's just the masked man left there and says, understood, I won't be long. After the others leave, the man turns towards you and begins unfastening his mask. His cameo then changes so that I can see he is what I'm assuming is human. He's removing the mask from his face and is now referred to as Unmasked Man. Hello, my friend. Don't care who you are or what you did. None of that matters anymore. All of us, we're equal nothings here. You are parched and he gives you a drink. Pardon me. Sorry, my throat is being a little bit difficult. You're parched and he gives you a drink. You ache and he binds your wounds. You hunger and he gives you food. Ellipsis. Little by little, it helps. He then shifts and becomes bigger, center of screen, and fully illuminated. So he's kind of blocking out the scene of the desert behind him. And his little name tag also shifts across to the center along with him. There, it turns out you're tougher than you look. Name's Hedwin. Now come on. Hedwin is also in orange, and I mouse over it, and it says, Hedwyn, he's one of the 3 masked wanderers who found you clinging to life in the downside. So by this point, pardon me, I'd like to pause so it's not just me reading a novel to everyone. And I was wondering if there's any questions that you had or anything that you just kind of want to dig into in terms of how much this UI is doing to inform me of the rules of who's talking to whom, and also in terms of what it wants me to know about what's going on within the story, and in terms of how to operate the game, because there's an awful lot going on.
The thing I was going to...
Part,
go ahead.
Oh, sure. The thing for my part, the question that I had for you is, at this point of your 10 minutes, Tony, did you feel like you had a good solid grasp on what was happening and why?
Within the game world?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I have clearly been left out in the desert for some reason to die.
Yeah.
I have been found by these 3 people. They also seem to be outcasts. They seem to think that I am possibly important somehow, but I don't know for what reason.
Because you're existing in a monomyth. That's why.
I'm a what?
Because you're existing in a monomyth.
I know you are, but what am I?
Very good.
Can you perhaps dig into that a little further, Aaron? I'm trying to be the useful idiot.
Right. Sorry. I thought we were inside baseballing.
No. Yes. Cool. We want to exclude the listeners as much as possible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, fuck you, rebel. So when I refer to the monomyths, I'm referring to the American monomyth narrative structure, which is sort of an extension of the hero's journey, which is basically like, imagine like a Clint Eastwood film, an outsider breezing into an area that is beset upon by trouble, where this outsider has the tools and the capability and the know-how to fix the problems of this place that they've found themselves in.
If you have a lawn that needs getting off of, then Clint's your person.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And then steadily, like, traditional hero's journey stuff happens in there in terms of like introducing allies and villains and exploring relationships, developing it, coming close to the solution, failing at it, suffering something.
Yep.
Where it diverges from the hero's journey is that, traditionally speaking, the American monomyth results in the death of the hero,
right?
In the sacrifice of the hero for the greater good. At which point the society that was upset when they entered it is restored to some form of normalcy, be that what it used to be or a new beginning.
Right.
And the all-American hero is immortalized as being the figure that gave them that return to normalcy.
Yep.
So that's I'm sort of getting vibes of that off of this.
Right. So Tom Cruise is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Actually, no, wait. If it results in the death of somebody, then we're looking at Sean Bean. Sean Bean.
Yes, definitely. Silent Hill is so monomythy.
Right. Yes. Steve, what were you going
but no,
to...
totally. Like Last Samurai. Last Samurai is exactly like a classic example of this.
Okay.
Without engaging with its problematic aspects.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Oh, man, I really want to just go off on a tangent here. I'm going to do it. Aaron,
yes.
You mentioned The Last Samurai.
I did.
Do you interpret samurai as singular or plural?
Yeah, so like the title is referring to both.
Yes.
Yes. But ultimately the communication in the film is that samurai is plural. The title is referring to samurai as plural.
Yes.
However, the marketing for the film certainly doesn't do that.
Yes. Hey, Aaron.
Yes.
The Last Jedi. Is Jedi singular or plural?
We'll have to find out in November. Or December. No, Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok's November. That's what I'm really excited about.
Okay, Steve, you were going to say something about where we're at and what's happening as well.
Yeah, the thing I was wondering was when it was going to give you more orange keywords to hover over, and how frequent it was going to be dispensing with things it wanted you to know more about.
Okay,
so like reverse Starship Troopers for you, and then it had an entire sentence of orange, which was unexpected from your description.
Yeah.
Yes, but however, if you think about it, that is still referring to a proper noun. It just happens to be me, and it didn't so much ask for my name, but it asked for my identity.
Yeah.
So
the other thing about that seemed to jump out at me is all of the narrative and the dialogue that's being delivered to you is in the moment.
Yes.
And directed at you. And so is your inner monologue, tutorial, magical, Navi, whatever.
Yep.
It's not written as your diary, which is what I was expecting.
Right.
When it was Commonwealth is blah, like a person taking notes to themselves. But then it says they are the people that found you, not they're the people that found me.
Yep. It's just second person all over the place.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's confusing me a little too. So when you bring up those tooltips, is it sort of like you recalling information, or is this some Navi-esque personality communicating to you that you're just unaware of?
I think this is possibly my mental footnotes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, I can buy that.
Okay. Shall I continue?
Sure.
Go.
No, we're out. We're done. 10-minute check. Alrighty. Before I forget, because I often do and I always feel terrible about it, there's music playing in the background.
Is it good?
Cool.
It's guitars. It's quite nice. It's quite pleasant.
Is it great though?
It is great.
Yeah, that's the question.
It is a great soundtrack.
All right.
And again, I always feel kind of shitty when I do this, but the best way I can think of to describe music is to compare it to other things.
Sure.
Terran-esque from StarCraft is how I would describe it.
Okay.
Not electric, not electric guitars, but acoustic-ish guitars. So.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
All right. So it then says, you sense no ill intent as he helps you up and leads you to an old black wagon. That's one word, black wagon. Nothing like the stately vessels that paraded Commonwealth criminals through alabaster streets. Now, the icon at the bottom...
Tony, can I...
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. When Commonwealth popped up again, was it orange again?
Yes.
And I imagine hovering over it would have given you the same information or updated information?
Yes, it would have. Yep.
Okay. Do you think that might update as the game progresses, as developments occur with those?
I mean, potentially it could, absolutely. In terms of technical implementation, that would be trivial to do. But it's not something that I noticed specifically in only playing 10 minutes of the game.
Sure. Yeah. No. It was a tangent my mind just jumped onto.
Yep. So the center icon at the bottom, which previously was kind of like red with an ellipsis on it, has changed at the end of this one and is now black with kind of like 3 stars in a triangle on it. And when I hit to continue, the parchment goes like a much sort of darker ink-stained pattern. And then there's a new header across it that is lighter and has like an iron cross symbol on it and says, Hedwyn beckons you to enter the black wagon. And in the center of this parchment is now... in a small caps font, it says "Step inside," and when I put the virtual cursor over it, tooltip tells me interact to proceed. Hint: press X at any time to advance events. So I select the "Step inside," and Hedwyn vanishes. The UI vanishes. There's a very fast zoom in towards the desert scene, and that crossfades into the interior of this black wagon cabin, which also kind of zooms into place.
Yep.
And then the UI burns back in like a piece of parchment burning, but in reverse. Burns into screen, and it says a lot
of good fire stuff happening here.
There's I'm not quite sure how it relates to the title, but I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. It says the weather-beaten wagon is as much a mess inside as out. You see the masked woman and the talkative creature taking stock of ancient-looking books. Now, there is so much to describe and look at in this particular screen that I'm not even going to attempt all of it, but I'll pull out a few key features that I can see. I can see that there is a brightly illuminated book sitting on a pedestal. I can see that there are raiments of these uniforms, the blue and orange, and all three of the masks that they're wearing hang up on the back wall. I can see like candles, and I can see just a lot of wood and a lot of parchment. And I can also make out that odd 5-pointed star symbol in a couple of places as well. So Headwind appears, and again, we're back to exactly the same form of how dialogue's appearing, how the character cameos are appearing, how everything's moving around, fading in and out, changing luminosity. Headwind says, "I'm back." The masked woman says, "And with a guest." She loosens the clasps on her mask. "You may call me Jodariel." She's now taken her mask off, and I can see that in the style of these giant mask horns, she also has giant actual horns coming out of her blonde hair. She has a large braid falling forward over...
That would be a logistical nightmare for putting that helmet on. How the fuck would you do that? Angle everything.
I mean, it's a video game, so...
Yep.
Sure.
Someone just drew it. Yeah.
She's got this thick braid over her shoulder. She has kind of like raccoon-style darkenings around her bright blue eyes. She looks very stern.
Mm-hmm.
Jodariel is a proper noun, so I cursor over it. Jodariel. She is the most imposing of the three masked wanderers who found you clinging to life. And then the masked creature appears and says, "And as for myself," the small one struggles with his mask. Jodariel soon assists him. And I hear the voice actor for this character go, "Ah."
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes...
That's a really nice touch.
And then he goes, "Yeah," and says, "Ow." And there's a huge kind of like red, jagged sort of flash explosion behind him. And he is revealed to be... How do I describe this? Kind of like a dog creature with a curly villain mustache.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. What kind of dog?
Like a Weasley situation? Or a Muttley?
He's got the same colours as Falcor the Luck Dragon.
Yeah.
Now I'm deliberately referring to things that I know Aaron hasn't seen.
Yep.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I know enough about the Neverending Story to know what you're talking about, but...
it's like an evil never-ending story. Okay.
So here's a lovely note.
So like a big dog? Like what kind of dog are we talking about? I need this visual image.
I mean, we're talking about a dog that looks like it has a lower jaw that is slightly longer than its upper jaw.
Okay, this is Muttley.
And it looks like he possibly may have a gold tooth as well.
Nice.
Which is
Might be Muttley. It's Muttley 25 years later. We never know.
As a really, really nice...
Audrey didn't change, but Dr. Jacoby did, so Muttley might change too.
As a nice piece of attention to detail here, there's a very, very quick transition between the character with ears down immediately after being hurt and then ears up as they continue talking. Mm-hmm. And the unmasked creature says, "That is to say, you may regard me by the name of Rookie Greentail."
Okay.
And I mouse over Rookie Greentail.
Say that one more time.
The whole thing.
No, just the name.
Rookie Greentail.
That's outstanding.
Rookie Greentail, he is the smallest yet loudest of the three masked wanderers who found you clinging to life. It's pretty nice. Such pleasantries.
It's like a name off of like a deleted track from Springsteen's Nebraska.
I mean, it could be.
Like, my name is Rookie Greentail, and I lost my job today. The economy isn't friendly, so I'm shipping my troubles away. And then something about shooting up a town.
Okay, so Aaron,
I'm so glad I kind of stuck the landing there, folks.
You did, Aaron.
Like
we have just discovered your version of my cursory googling indicates.
Yeah, well done.
From now on, every week there must be a 4-line Springsteen-esque little stanza from you.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's the same chord progression. It's the same chord progression every song, so it's the same chord progression every week. I'm maintaining tradition.
Throwing some shade at the Bruce there.
Yeah. I have a question.
No, it's the perfect chord progression.
Sorry, yes, Steve, a question.
When does the sports happen?
I was about to say, you're being very professional trying to keep this podcast on track, Steve, but now you've just like thrown sand in my eyes.
Yep.
The rookie Greentail's like, let's go play some soccer now.
Let's put it this way. We're getting there.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Such pleasantries out of the way, the horned woman then motions to the others. She glances at you sidelong as she speaks. Can they do it? The man says, pardon me. The man says, hope so. Steve, if you're keen to get to the sports, I'll kind of paraphrase. Okay. Rookie says, what? Then what are we waiting for? Hey, chum, nice meeting you and all, but tell me something. You know how to read or what?
Do you get to answer yes or no?
Yeah.
I get 3 choices.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, so no, then, what to read?
It then changes the parchment to the darker color again, and it says, he is asking if you are a reader. Reader is capitalized, and I can cursor over it, and it says, reader, one who can derive meaning from text. You know, like me, Tony. Like I'm doing live on internet radio right now. Literacy
like you're doing to read that tooltip.
Literacy has been prohibited for centuries. Those with knowledge of the old ways, capitalized, violate the law of the land. And my 3 options are admit it, deny it, or remain silent.
Okay.
Admit it. Over time, you manage to learn something of the old ways in spite of Commonwealth decree. Deny it. Literacy is a serious crime. No one in their right mind would dare violate the law of the land. Or remain silent. Who you are or what you did to earn your sentence is no one's business but your own. And I went with remain silent because I still don't know who I am or why I am or what I did. So I'm going to play it that way.
It makes sense. That's not the sort of question you would just answer to 3 people that you had just met if reading is this criminalized.
Yep. You stare back at Rookie but say nothing in response. He stares back for several moments, then grows angry. Silent treatment, huh? Now, don't you play dumb with us there, understand? The dumb don't have those kinds of markings. Those are something else. We know what you are. Jadariel says, reader, you owe us your life. We asked for something simple in exchange. Open one of those books back there and tell us what it says. Hedwin says, sorry to put you on the spot like this, my friend. The exiles indicate the books in their possession, and then it gets me to curse over, have a look, and press the button. So everyone fades out, and it's now just me looking at the interior of the Black Wagon. I can see 4 books on screen, but the one that's on the pedestal is like about 1 trillion times brighter than pretty much anything else on the screen. So I cursor over it, and it says, strange book, one of several such heavy, ominous volumes. The exiles you meet seem very interested in them. Interact to learn more. You pick up one of the old and heavy volumes bound in materials you do not recognize. And again, there's the 3-star triangle for continue. So I know something different's about to happen. When I hit the button, a 3D book zooms right up in the center of screen. Now, this is lovingly rendered. In terms of its texturing, it is completely keeping the 2D painted style of the backgrounds, but it is definitely a 3D asset, and it looks very gorgeous. It also has this strange shifted kind of pentagram star on it. I open the book up, and there is just a bucket load of more text. The entire left page is text. It's kind of glowing in a golden color, and it's in ye olde fancy font, including the giant embellished first letter of the first word.
The drop cap. Yep.
On the right of screen, I can see that there are a number of tabs down the side, and only one of them is currently active and illuminated and has a star on it. That folded star symbol is also repeated on the right-hand facing page, along with a bunch of symbols that look similar to, but probably not the same as, the symbols of the zodiac that we have in our world. Sure. And there is also, down the bottom of the screen, another masked sort of sketch of a character in robes, with both of their hands raised up next to their head and their index and middle fingers raised on on each hand. So this is clearly a tome of some import. I just made that phrase up myself. It's pretty good, huh? My options are to inspect or to close. If I hit the inspect button or press the Y button, it essentially changes it from game art text to here is the UI text. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I can read it if you want to. What would you prefer?
Give it a whirl.
Sure. This is called Forward, as in the forward of a book. A formal welcome undersigned by the 8 scribes. You, dear reader, are an exile of the downside, such as we, the 8 who wrote this book of rights. That you possess it and have capacity to glean its words is testament enough to your potential. Thus we reveal a path from this forsaken place to freedom, a homecoming in glory. The stars themselves shall be your guide. Ere the turning of the year's first solstice, seek the nearest longitude beneath the brightest of 8, as they align as shown. Arrive as a triumvirate, clad in the raiments of the rights, bearing this book. Oblige the voice that tells you more.
Okay.
So when I quit back out of this...
and then Twin Peaks starts.
Yeah. When I quit back out of this and see the book again, I then noticed that this sort of 5-pointed folded star symbol also has other 5-pointed stars at some of the key points. Kind of like the apices of all of these things. So I close the book. The 3D asset folds close and disappears off the screen. The UI burns back in again and says, the book describes a complicated method through which exiles can return to the Commonwealth. The words swim through your mind as Hedwyn gets your attention. Pardon me. Hedwyn says, well, friend, what does it say? But then your vision starts to fade and blur. You feel your body weaken and give out. Everything disappears and fades to black. Then I get a little bit of a loading screen, but it's very quick. And when it fades back in again, we just have colors everywhere. So my first impression when I see this thing is that I'm in a theatre. Okay. Because there are bright, very colourful, almost like curtains kind of hung down, but they're not hung dead straight. They're kind of all folded and fancy. And it's framing in the centre of the screen what I'm assuming is a giant mural or a painting. Now, this looks like a giant looming figure pointing 2 fingers sort of downwards at something just off the bottom of the screen. They're clearly leaning and looking downwards. They're wearing what I assume is like a British judge's wig.
Okay.
But at the crown of their head is an enormous bejeweled 5-pointed star, and there are golden god ray sparks beaming down off the top of the screen here. And now we get a voiceover that is in English. And as this English voice is speaking, this giant 5-pointed star on the forehead of this mural is sort of like glowing and flickering as the voice is speaking. Now, I could train as a voice actor for another 50 years and still not deliver a performance that's as good as this one. So, trust me, it's better when you see it.
Sure.
Just kind of planting that seed in everyone's head here. Reader, dare you tamper with forbidden knowledge so soon after your sentence into exile? 'Tis true what the book says. You can be free again. Now, as this voice is speaking, the camera is slowly starting to push down, and I see this 5-pointed star symbol is what this mural is pointing at. There are also gorgeous Veroni grid shape sort of flickering embers. That's the best way I can think of to describe it. Steve, you know what Veroni is, I'm assuming?
Yes, or a Veronoi, if you have a fancy pronunciation. Yep.
Sure, I probably pronunciated it wrong, but...
I honestly don't know which one's correct. They're both lovely.
And these... So, the art part of my brain at this point was kind of having a fit, like an awesome fit. And I'm trying to figure out, are these painted? Are they fading in and out? Are they using a particle system? What's going on? They look beautiful, and they're used throughout many, many scenes. But they're very, very prominent here, and prominent enough that I kind of became fixated with them when I was playing it and wasn't paying attention to the voice as much as I should have. So I'm not going to keep reading what this character says, but essentially this character is clearly speaking to me.
Right.
And is talking about a lot of words that I've just heard before, the rights. And as it keeps scrolling down, I see what is the open foldings of a book, but they're in the style of a playing field. So this is now in the style of a camera that you would expect when you're looking at sports.
Oh my god!
We made it, right? Now, at either end of this...
It only took 45 minutes.
When that text is scrolling down, I'm assuming none of that has any of the orange hovery bits in it?
This is all spoken in English with no subtitles.
Okay.
That's fair. Yep. That's fascinating.
It's all just spoken. Okay. Do you want to dig into this now, Aaron?
On purpose.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. New languages have been created.
What sort of purpose are you gleaming from this, Aaron?
Is that English has been outlawed, and you're accessing memory banks of that, and that means that your character also knows English, but then is presumably bilingual with whatever language is now being spoken by everybody else.
Yep.
Because that was the thing that I was sort of wondering, was I was like, you're saying that there's inflections and there's cadence, there's this feels like an actual genuine language is being communicated here, and not, say, Banjo-Kazooie speak, just boo, 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 boo.
Correct.
Regardless of what it is that's actually being said. So I was like, that takes work, that takes effort. Why not just do it in English?
Yep.
But now I think I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's significant. Do you think language is sort of like one of the pillars, the thematic cornerstones of this game?
I mean, it caught me by surprise that the first multi-choice response that I got was whether I could read. where I'm a human sitting in front of a computer reading text that's asking me if I can read.
That was concerning too.
It's very intentional. Like it feels absolutely central to what I'm assuming this game is about. But yeah, it was very surprising, especially because now I'm doing a sport.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I'm very close to doing a sport. In terms of the counter here, Steve,
stuff your worries in a sack for now.
In terms of the timer here, Steve, this is just after about 4 minutes into the game. So this is a folded book that is in the style of a playfield. The open book is very, very dark, whereas all of this background mural that I was scrolling past was very bright and multicolored. There are two, I'm just going to call them goals at either end of the field. These are both circular and embedded into the page. There's two different symbols at either end of the screen. The one on the right is a 5-pointed star. The one on the left is kind of like a very stylized, almost like eagles spread wings, but using only kind of primitive shapes and lines. There is also more of the, was it Voronoi? How do I pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Voronoi.
There are a lot of these things sort of speckling and sparkling on the actual playfield as well. So the camera then stops from being dead centered, and it shifts very slowly to the right. And as it does this circular shape at the right side of screen explodes into a pyre of bright yellowy green flame that almost looks like it's in the shape of a person at times. So it's flames that are kind of flickering, and it's clearly meant to be some sort of flame, but it's also clearly not just a flame. It then whip pans across to the left-hand end and zooms right in on a blue flame that erupts. And as this happens, the three characters who rescued me come tumbling out of this pyre, and they're facing to the right of screen. They're all dressed, again, with their masks on, and they're all in full robes. These are sort of blue and orange or red, depending on the light, robes. So the short version of this is that these three characters, much in the style of, now I'm going to get my cartoons mixed up. Is it Yu-Gi-Oh?
That's a cartoon.
That is one.
Are now on the playing board, and
I'm kind of trap cards.
I'm kind of like the person what is going to control them and tell them how to do the sport.
Okay,
that's Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's when I also realized that not only is this voice that was speaking to me in English without subtitles telling me the world fiction, but it's also kind of telling me, it's explaining the rules of the game that is within this game that is actually part of the game that I, Tony, am playing. So it's this really tricky balance of lore and world building, character delivery, and tutorializing. And at this point where I realized what I was about to start doing, I went, oh, it's the dealer from Hand of Fate.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it.
In terms of the role that this is fulfilling within how to play the video game. So cameos of characters appear again. Hedwyn says, "It worked." Jadariel says, "So it is true." And Ruki says, "Yeah, but what now? And where'd the reader go?"
Mm-hmm.
Hedwyn says, "They should be out there still. For now, we have to put our faith in them." Jadariel says, "They could abandon us." Hedwyn says, "They won't." Then I quit the game. No, I'm kidding.
Yep. Take that.
You look upon the three of them from beyond as Hedwyn then calls out to you. "Reader, we aim to free ourselves. We will not grow old and die in the downside. And now I swear to you, when we get out of here, you're going to come with us," and so on to freedom. All right. So all of the text and all the UI fades out. The camera shifts over, and then a completely new type of UI that I've never seen before in the game appears as a giant orb comes crashing down and lands kind of like asteroid style, dead center of the field, and throws a whole bunch of rubble out of it. And this completely different style of UI appears giant in the center of screen and then zooms up to the top left and says, "Use left analog stick to approach the celestial orb." As this is happening, I don't have a name to call this character. The announcer, I'm going to call them.
Okay.
The announcer
Sure.
starts talking about celestial orb falls from the heavens when the time is nigh. I press the left stick, and the character of Hedwyn walks to the right as I push right, directly into the orb, and then picks up the orb that is then floating and glowing over his head. It then says, "Press A to pass the orb." When I do that, a nice bright line gets drawn to the character I'm going to pass it to. The orb gets passed and is now glowing above Jodariel's head. It then tells me to hold A to pass to Ruki. Now, when I hold the A button, this line connects Jodariel to Hedwyn, and then I move the analog stick, and it snaps over to Ruki, and I pass the orb to him. Ruki now has the orb floating above their head, and it tells me only one exile can move at a time as it takes control away from me and shows them automatically pass the ball between all three of them again.
Okay.
Without me touching any buttons. It then tells me to hold right trigger to sprint, and tells me your exile's abilities are shown here, and points to a new piece of UI that has appeared at the bottom of the screen. That's reinforcing to me A to pass, right trigger to sprint. In the bottom left-hand corner are also three images of the three characters. Because Ruki has the orb, he is very brightly illuminated with a giant golden border. There's also a symbol that looks kind of like the burning pyre, and it has the number 100 written next to it. So I hold right trigger to sprint. Ruki sprints around very quickly, and I'm steering him with the left analog stick. A little stamina bar appears below him and depletes. It tells me to sprint until the stamina is depleted, and I do. And then it says, plunge into the opposing pyre. And the camera, which had previously been focused on my side of the book, then zooms over so I can see the pyre at the other end. So I take Ruki and I sprint directly into the pyre, and I get a really nice kind of like... It's like the element of the pyre is the only thing on screen that stays, and it zooms in giant in the center of the screen. I see Ruki kind of swirl around and disappear into it as there's all these particles going off everywhere. And there's another pyre symbol with 100 written next to it. It says -15, and it drops it down to 85. So I just scored 15 points, or took 15 health, air quotes, off of this enemy pyre. All right. So Ruki is now banished for a time. So I can see his little outline on screen, but he's not there. So because Ruki scored, I can't use him for a little bit. Sure. I've only got my two remaining characters. again, this whole time, the announcer is talking and talking and talking, kind of explaining all of this to me in world lore. It then zips back across to the other pyre, and I see 3 ghostly versions of the 3 characters I'm controlling appear. Each one of them in turn does a little activate animation, and a big glowing ring appears on the floor around them. Jodariel's is the largest because she is the largest. Hedwyn's is a little smaller. Rookie's is smaller still. Where these rings intersect, it kind of forms a continuous sort of bubbly, cloudy-shaped area of these 3 intersecting sections. My 2 remaining characters then do exactly the same thing. Evil Hedwyn from the other team walks in.
Bizarro Hedwyn.
Yep, walks in, picks up the orb that's appeared back in the center of screen. Because he is now carrying the orb, it is now the green-yellow color of the enemy pyre and all of the enemy kind of auras. I think the game calls them auras.
Okay.
So then what the game is teaching me now is it tells me to use left stick to approach the adversary. As Hedwyn and Jodariel's auras stop intersecting, both of them shrink. So your auras are larger when you have them overlapping. And they both shrink when you're no longer overlapping. I walk directly into Evil Hedwyn. The instant that my aura touches him, he disintegrates. And the celestial orb pops free, much like a football.
Okay.
Now,
sports.
It doesn't bounce. Wherever it hits the ground, it implants itself in the ground after it is flown away.
Okay.
So I'm not in control again. I see the evil Jodariel come in and pick up the orb. It then tells me to hold B to banish the adversary from afar. So I hold the B button, and then I get a bar, kind of a thick bar extending out across the ground from myself as I'm anchored in place. I can move the analog stick around to aim it. I aim it so it's pointing right at evil Jodariel. I release almost like a tidal concussion wave of aura and disintegrate her. The orb pops out again. The announcer tells me, correctly done.
Okay.
Which I thought was a nice touch. Evil Rookie then comes in and picks it up again, and it asks me to repeat the action by banishing him as well, which I do. The ball pops over behind me, and the game then emphasizes the pyre, the enemy pyre, where all 3 characters return from their banishment. I pick up the orb again, and then I'd noticed this previously, but it teaches me again via a tooltip. You lose your aura when you have the orb.
Yep.
So I'd seen this happen on the enemy characters, but now it's pointing it out when it's happening to me. So Jodariel, who doesn't have the orb, still has her aura, but Hedwyn, who has just picked it up, does not. So you can't run into enemies when you have the orb.
So has it told you yet what happens when 2 things that have auras on opposing teams touch each other?
Sorry, Ken?
So if you're red and they're blue, and both of those characters have auras bump into each other, what happens?
When an aura hits an aura?
Yeah, when opposing auras hit each other.
Sure. So I think, I'm not sure if it happens here in this 10 minutes, but I've played a little bit beyond it. The auras are different sizes depending on the character. Yeah. So with Rookie's being the smallest and Jodariel's being the largest, hers would hit Rookie's way before Rookie's would hit hers. If you've got 2 characters that have the same size aura, I'm not sure how it resolves that. Presumably, you're only ever moving the character who has the orb. The other 2 characters remain static.
Okay.
So I think what has happened previously is that if it's been a character that I haven't been controlling, I think they just get killed. But things are pretty frenetic and happen pretty quickly when you're playing the rights. And not all of it is stuff that I've completely figured out yet. Anyway, the next thing that it says as Hedwyn walks towards the enemy pyre, that all 3 of the enemy characters are completely surrounding with their aura, so I can't approach it. It tells me, press X to leap into the adversary's pyre, and it shows me a little ghost version of Hedwyn running across and leaping.
Yep.
So leaping
across
the top of the aura. Yep. Now the announcer says...
Come on and slam.
The announcer, while this is happening, says, "Now I say jump," which I interpreted as a David Bowie reference. So I'm going to go with Bowie there. I thought it was very nice.
Yep.
So I do this thing. Hedwyn does kind of like a backflip as he jumps in, and again we get the kind of zoomed in version, and he takes more points off than Rookie did. Rookie only took off 15, and Hedwyn took off 20. So I scored different amounts of damage based on who jumps into the pyre. Rookie is then returned, Hedwyn is banished. And then it says to me, extinguish the adversary's pyre, and it's fucking game on.
So did it give you a sense that the banishing is only ever one character at a time?
It's
because it said earlier they are banished for a time.
Yep. So again, I'm not so sure that it trains me this specifically during this 10 minutes, but what happens is if you score with a character and they're banished and then you score quickly with another character, you can end up with just one person left.
Okay.
Because I'm assuming they're all on a cooldown in terms of how long it takes them to get back. I don't know if the cooldown is different for different characters.
Right.
Sure.
Because it's sort of indicating to you here that by having somebody else jump in, you get the next player back, which isn't really what I was expecting to have happen. Because it sounded like they were on cooldown time. There's not just like one in, one out. Right.
Anyway, it's told me extinguish the adversary's fire, and now I'm playing this sport / game.
Uh-huh.
My pyre still has 100 hit points. The enemy pyre now has 65, so I have an advantage. Now, this kind of caught me out a little bit because previously it has been instructing me of do this move, now do this move, now do this move, now do this move. And I realize that this is a fault of my assumptions, but I had assumed that this game was, Wego is not the right term, but I assumed that it happened in increments.
Not just full real-time sport.
It's just full real-time sport.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, I went, oh, God, and my brain started melting.
Yeah, no, that is a weird thing, because it makes a point of saying you only will ever move one of your characters at once.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which makes it seem like you're playing like a alternating turn tactics.
Yes.
Pyre, basketball.
Yep. Which is weird because it was very clear that I had full real-time control of these characters at each stage of what I was doing. It's just that all of the things weren't operating at once.
Yep.
And when I realized what was going to be required of me in terms of like, I can only move one person at a time, already I can feel the game is just hugely pushing me towards alternate characters frequently. And to do that, I either have to be passing the orb around my own team if I have possession, or I have to be quickly shifting a character into a position that I want and then switching to another character to shift them into a position that I want to try and box people in or jostle them around. It's stressful, and I mean that in a good gameplay kind of way. It is stressful. And I can also tell you that even though I had a 35-point lead, and even though this is clearly the game tutorial and it's going easy on me, there was a lot of adrenaline happening here, and it was very cool. Anyway, I have to extinguish the adversary's pyre, and I did, but it took a while. It didn't take a super long time, but I do a whole bunch of different things. I get banished by people. I pass the ball around. I banish other people. I do a lot of sprinting with Rookie. He's very fast and nimble and can move around very quickly. I also then realize that other characters can sprint too. And I can also throw the orb. Now, I did this by accident without realizing that I could, and then I got confused. Because what happened was, what I think happened was, one of the tooltips in the top left is now telling me, try banishing adversaries with the B button. So it's reminding me of this thing that I learned before. But when I read this, I was currently controlling a character who had the orb, and I can't remember if I did push the B button or if I pushed a different button by accident, and then I threw the orb and somebody else got it. And I went, wait, did I just do what I was supposed to do, or did I do the wrong thing? And because I fucked up, the enemy scored. Anyway, I play sports for a fair while. I'm starting to get a sense of how often should I pass. I'm trying to get a sense of, oh God, the characters don't move if I'm not directly controlling them.
Yeah.
And I was kind of locking up a little bit because I was going, wait a minute, if I want to control another character and I have the orb, then I think I have to pass to them. But more often than not, the character that I've got the orb with is closest to the Pyre because, of course, they are, because that's where I'm trying to get to. The majority of my game ended up with me being, well, unless it looks like I'm fucked, I'm just using this character because they've got the orb at the moment, and I'm going to try and get there if I can. And I mean, for the most part, that worked. I think I only scored with Ruki and Hedwyn. I don't think I scored with Jodariel because she moves very slowly.
Right. But presumably is worth a lot of points. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But because she's also got the largest aura, she's also really great to leave parked on your Pyre.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
I mean, there's clear roles that I'm not being told that, hey, you can use different characters better or worse for different things, but I'm automatically just kind of figuring that out through play. So the enemy did one goal on me, and I did several on them. Reduced their Pyre to 0, and then it sort of slowly pans back up to the giant mural, and the voice is still talking to me saying, now you understand, or do you? This was but a glimpse, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Before we get back to the other story stuff, questions?
I'm assuming that the enemy team also only moves one character at a time.
Correct.
Okay, good. Otherwise, my brain was not having it.
Right.
I'm imagining that you are basically playing Skulls of the Shogun Netball Edition. Does that sound right?
It's like inverse.
Oh,
netball.
this makes sense now.
It's inverse
just unlocked
netball.
It for me, Steve.
It's inverse netball, Steve,
Yep.
because you must move when you have the orb.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Also, you're getting burned up in a giant flame and being banished every time you score, but
Yeah, but it seems like okay. Just like netball. Well, you're banished from the semicircle for some reason.
Aaron, questions?
I got nothing. The only thing that I was going to say was that I was having a really, really hard time following what was actually happening for you.
That's all right. I was explaining it poorly because it's sports.
No, I wouldn't say necessarily that. The observation that I was going to make was that I think that slowly as it started to piece itself together in my head, I began to realize that this is a sort of thing. Like this is, in a lot of ways, this is a new sport that you're explaining to us here. Yep. And quite often, a new sport or even a new game is understood best by just playing it, right?
Yes, I'm totally a master at this now.
Yep.
yeah, for sure.
I'm not.
Well, yeah. Understanding can precede mastery.
It's often best if it does.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. You don't want to master something and then 30 years later, oh, I get it now.
Damn tacit learners.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a sport that you could play in the real world? Like, could you write the rule book and go, all right, 3v3, Pyre, let's go?
If you had some AR augmentation to figure out when people had been hit by auras, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, all you need really is just like laser tag for that, right?
Yeah, but you would probably need to be able to see.
Yeah, you need to be able to see
auras to be able to maneuver properly.
Okay.
Just a little bit of wiring, just hook up a massive bike brake light. Beep, beep, beep.
The rules are clear to me.
Yep.
How I play the game well is a totally baffling mystery. But I mean, that's how it goes, yeah?
Yeah. But I like that you already had your beginner strategies of this character has a big radius, so I'll leave them on defense.
Yes.
Because they'll be easier
also
to
because
do.
they're very slow.
Yeah. There's two things pushing you there to say this character is on defense.
Yep.
Stuff like that coming out already, which is cool.
Rookie's on point guard,
sprinting
quickly, and because he's because his aura is quite small, like you're not relying on him to hit people, you're relying on him to get around people.
Yep. It said that you had...
is why he does the least amount of damage to the Pyre.
Yeah. You said that they had special abilities on cooldown. Was that always sprinting? Or do they have different special abilities of some sort?
There's a stamina bar for sprinting.
Okay.
That depletes and then replenishes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's per character,
I thought you mentioned,
I believe.
Yeah. I thought you mentioned something about abilities that they had. But maybe...
So the abilities that they have is all of them can do the banish sort of shockwave.
Oh, okay,
they can all throw the ball, they can all pass the ball, and so
okay,
on.
so those are the same per character. It's not like this character has a vacuum ability.
Yep. But I don't think I did it here in this tutorial, but Jodariel's sprint is kind of like a lunge. So she doesn't sprint continuously. She does like a surge lunge forwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just getting a sense of it. It's not a MOBA. It's not like, well, this character has a stun and a dash and a silence, whereas this character has a... Yeah.
No, that would be way too much complexity to keep track of in your head.
Yeah.
In real time. Now, I have a really peculiar thing that I want to point out here that I think is great.
Okay.
Because I've now been thrown back to the same loading screen that I saw earlier. And I also saw it when I started the game at the very, very first time. However, only now do I have a gameplay tooltip. Only now, having just played the tutorial, exiting from the actual there is sports in this game, do I get a tooltip.
A sports tutorial? Yeah.
It says, during the rites, only one exile on each side is permitted to move at any given time. The three must act as one. The fact that it's shown me this only after I have played the sport is fucking great.
Yeah.
I mean, we pointed out a number of times in a number of different games across many, many genres that it will throw how to play the game at you at a loading screen way, way, way before you've ever hit a point where you can use it or even know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, totally.
So, yes, it was just a little point that I wanted to highlight because I really appreciated it.
A nice moment of context sensitivity.
Yep. So we are back inside the Black Wagon now, and it says the others are still picking themselves up as you awaken. Yuki says, well, that was something. Edwin says, that was our way out. And Ruki says, so now we just follow the stars or what? Jodariel appears and says, supposedly, Reader, come, let us regard the night. And then I zoom back out. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah. Very night.
Yes. Much night out here. Well, onwards.
So it zooms back out of the Black Wagon, and I'm now back at exactly the same canyon vista from the very beginning of the game, except now all the colors are muted and it's nighttime. Actually, a good way to describe this is that it's now the best kind of day for night palette.
Okay.
In terms of the colors and what they look like. It tells me Jodariel leads you outside where a clear night sky awaits. She says, now show us, before the howlers catch our scent, where shall the rites commence? And rites tells me an ancient ritual competition through which the worthiest exiles regain their freedom. The 8 scribes gave their freedom so that we may yet have ours. Prayer from the Book of Rites. So when I press to continue, it says you gaze at the stars, seek out your destination. I select this, and then we get a night sky vista fades in. There are a number of 5-pointed stars glowing dimly and one enormously bright 5-pointed star with multiple sort of concentric rings around it with a whole bunch of swirling text. And when I cursor over it, it tells me Goal, the South Star. The South Star burns bright over a massive ridge of stone, much further than the naked eye can see. Interact to determine the location of the next rite. So I select it. It zooms in on this star. It then shows me a little, kind of like a little plaque of a piece of art, which, although I don't reach it in this 10 minutes, turns out to be the landmark feature upon which the sport will be played.
Okay.
Of that in-world location. The scene then fades back into the canyon, and the characters are speaking to me again. Jadariel says, 200 leagues due east, the ridge of Gol. I cursor over the ridge of Gol, and it says, according to the stars, the next rite shall soon commence here. The fossil remains of the serpent titans slain by Golathanian yet loom over those living in its shadow. And that's my 10 minutes.
I liked the use of the word leagues.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice little nod.
And
100 sports leagues to the east.
Yeah.
Classic gamer humor.
Yep.
What happens when I cursor over gamer, Aaron?
Oh, I don't know. It just the tooltip just says don't.
All right. So, do either of you have anything that you want to start with, or can I?
I have a general question, probably a quick one.
Sure. Yep, go for it.
How much of this 10 minutes did you spend playing Pyreball?
Just under half.
Okay. You've played more than 10 minutes at this point, you said earlier.
I have, yes. Yep.
Does that ratio track? Like, do you spend half of your time Pyreballing and half of it interactive fictioning?
My gut check says that feels reasonable, but I suspect that may change the further through the game you get, because at the moment what this game's having to do is it's having to give me instruction and world building and everything, like super front loaded. But what I do appreciate about it is that it's gone. So this is a visual novel and a sports game.
Yep.
At the same time.
Deal with it.
It's not. Yeah, and it's all in there, and it's clearly given me an indication of how one nests within the other, and how one informs the other, and how one kind of talks to the other. And it's also given me an enormous number of different kinds of text to read and interact with, along with, as we were pointing out before, the no subtitled, voice only speaking in English of the announcer. There's possibly a setting somewhere to turn subtitles
I imagine
for
there
them
would
on,
be,
but they're not on by default, and I found that again to be a very specific choice.
For a text-based game to not default to subtitles, that seems like something very important to them.
But I mean, in the setting, I mean, I started calling them the announcer. That's my label that I've given them, because it kind of fulfills that role. Within the setting, it makes sense that you're not going to have simple game operation instructions written on screen, along with gameplay stats and values written on screen, along with character dialogue written on screen. Like, that would just turn into a giant fucking mess. And it's far easier to keep an ear cocked and be listening to what the announcer is saying while you're reading these tooltips and while you're trying to get a handle on the control scheme and the general tactics of how to play this sport that doesn't have a name. I mean, it's called the Rights, which is a weird name to give a sport, but I guess that's what we should call it.
Can't imagine like advertising campaigns for this season on the Rights.
And then the post-show wrap-up, the Rights stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, cool. They reverse engineered from there.
Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff going on here.
There is.
For me, having played it, it feels very, very cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
For the two of you and infinite other people having to suffer through me verbally explaining it, did it feel cohesive?
No, it totally did. It felt fine. It felt like it made sense. It felt like one, like you described, one is nested within the other.
Yeah.
And that made sense. I think the only thing that feels weird hearing it is it takes a lot longer for you to read aloud text that is intended for you to be reading, not listening to.
To be skimming, yeah.
Rather than explaining the rules of a 3v3 basketball match.
Yep.
Yeah, I think most of my confusion, beyond confusion as to what it was that you were actually playing when you were playing Pyreball, came from that. Came from just trying to keep track with, speaking a line, then unpacking it, and then moving on from there.
Yeah.
This does all seem to be products of the same whole. And that's not an easy thing to pull off. I mean, the visual novel does lend itself well to integrate with other genres.
Yep.
But like integrate well with other genres of its kind, right? Like a point and click adventure, integrates very, very well, or some light platforming elements,
Yep.
Integrate really, really well with that. A full blown fucking sports game. This is a new frontier.
Kinda, but I mean, the something else that I was reminded of here was something like Puzzle Quest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because while it's not a real time, air quotes, sports game, it's still compartmentalized in the same way that this is, with
totally.
enemy fights and puzzle boards.
Oh, puzzle ball, got it. Yep.
Puzzle ball.
And I mean, there's in that particular game, I mean, there's overworld maps and there's equipment and quests and leveling up and blah blah blah. There may be some of that in here too. I don't know. I haven't played a huge amount of it. But there is something about this that feels fresh, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
It's kind of... There's a couple of things that are striking to me about this is that until a week ago, this is not a thing that I had heard of. Not Pyre, the video game, as in interactive fiction with sports in it.
Right.
Whereas in the last 2 weeks, we have Behold the Kickmen, which is a sports game with interactive fiction in it, and Pyre, an interactive fiction game with sports in it.
Yep.
But now that we're talking about it, it seems so natural, right? Like FIFA, NBA, etc., all have massive career modes in them.
Yeah.
That, from what I understand, is one of the main things people keep coming back to play them for. Is because that career mode keeps getting more and more involved. Mm-hmm. And but they have so much budget that they can just do cutscenes and open world, walk around, look at your apartment stuff. And Spike Lee.
Yes, and bring in renowned filmmakers to make video games.
Yeah, whereas when we look at bring that down to the scale that an indie can achieve, it makes sense that you still want that story-driven career mode of your sports game, and that can become interactive fiction that can do that for you. Mm-hmm. Makes so much sense.
Yep.
So I'm in two minds as to how much to dive into this, but I'll throw it to the two of you and see what you think. Supergiant Games have a very strong and overwhelming sense of world and of narrator.
Yes.
My assumption going into playing this, like the narrator in Bastion is very overt and is there and kind of more or less points out to you that they are the narrator.
Yeah.
My remembering of Transistor is a little bit rusty, but I believe the sword does an awful lot of talking in that game.
Yes, it does.
Yes, talks to you, the player, and you, and the character. Yeah,
and through your peripheral if you choose.
Yes. I really have to play that again. And in this one, going into it, then
I need to finish.
I was kind of sitting here while I was playing it, and this is purely because I know who the developers of it are, and I was sort of waiting for a narrator.
Yep.
Fairly or unfairly, it was kind of resting there in my mind. And when I heard the announcer start to speak in English, I went, and that's kind of where I felt a lot of penny drop sort of stuff starting to happen in my head.
Okay.
As to how the story of this, like what's the backbone of the delivery of this story going to be? I could be really fucking wrong.
Yep.
But let's assume that I'm not.
More fun that way.
Because if that is the case, then the narrator is not so much a narrator as a commentator.
Yeah.
Yep.
But also a narrator.
Which in a sense is kind of what the narrator in Bastion was sometimes.
Yeah. But this is presented in a very different context of being a sports game.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go into it as we were talking about the 10 minutes because there's just way too much stuff to verbally explain. But the announcer is commenting on things when I score with a particular character. They will make reference to the fact that character just did something.
Right.
And so on and so on.
Yep.
Sorry, Aaron, you were going to say?
Well, for me, my looking at it in terms of the trajectory is each game is an exploration of the different ways in which narration can be utilized for a narrative experience. Where Bastion has the narrator as being a removed, almost ethereal force that talks, that directly comments on what the player character is doing, but then is also speaking to you, the player, as someone who is experiencing this story as it's being told, which is kind of a complicated thing to explain, but makes a shitload of sense when you actually sit down to it. Then you watch that get simplified, but still kind of complicated with Transistor, with the idea of the narrator is also a character that is also the object that you use.
Yeah.
That is directly engaging with you, the player, because it can speak through your PS4 controller if you want it to. And I see that being distilled down further again, where one was sort of a removed figure from everything that's happening within the environment to one that is directly inside of the environment. And then this third one, not necessarily, narrating the overarching idea of what's happening, just commenting on what it is that you're doing in real time. You, the reader, who is also reading text, directly commenting on you being someone who is playing the game. So I'm just seeing all of these different explorations of how we can mix the idea of avatar and user through narration.
And I still have no idea who I am within this game world.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, air quotes, what I am.
Yeah.
What my purpose is or what my role is, but I have no idea of the person.
You're Alexander Hamilton. You just need to, get that constitution rolling and then get shot in the duel and allow America to be what it is.
Sure. I mean, it all fits. It's a sports game, and I'm not giving away my shot. So
yep,
that's it. That's there. It is. There it is.
I don't have any other any particular points that I want to bring up. So do either of you have any other topics you want to cover?
No, I'm good.
I'm also good. I think it's time for that check.
Alrighty. So 10-minute check. Did this game tell me what it's about? Yeah. It's a game where I'm playing somebody who is special in a unique way. I have an ability to do and control things that other characters in the world don't. And I've been, I guess, joined up with a ragtag team of misfits and exiles, and we're all trying to win our freedom back through this in-game sport/activity called the Rights. It's also, in terms of telling me what the game is about, it's going to have a mix of character-driven, interactive fiction, dialogue, narrative, and it's also going to have me running around controlling 3 characters on a field trying to throw an orb into a pyre.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Dynamite.
Did it tell me how to play it? Yes, it absolutely did. There are a number of layers of UI and tooltips and voice all being shown to me and delivered to me just in time for me to use them of the moment where I'm having to do something with the information, which is very much appreciated. And by the end of it, I had a really clear sense of how I was going to have to interact with both the dialogue side of things and the sports field kind of side of things. So yeah, that's
awesome.
That's it. I think it's time for the plugs, Steve.
Okay. If you'd like to get in contact with us and let us know what you thought of the episode, you can either email us. The email address is contact@thefirst10minutes.com, or you can find us on many social media websites and services. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, technically still SoundCloud, Libsyn, YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. I think that's all the ones. Is that all the ones?
I think it might be.
It's certainly most of the ones. And all those places you can find us by looking for The First 10 Minutes. That's with the 1 and the 10.
Absolutely. We're also doing some Let's Plays on YouTube at the moment as well. It's something that we've started doing recently, so we recommend going to the YouTube page and checking those out. They're a lot of fun to make. I hope they're enjoyable to watch as well. Steve, if people want to get in touch with you personally, how do they do that?
They can find me at stevehallywell.com, or they can find me on Twitter _SteveHallywell.
And if you want to get in touch with me, Tony, I am at Kalinskald on Twitter. That's KALINSKALD. I also do a game developer interview podcast series called Downloadable Context, which you can find at downloadablecontext.com or at DLContext on Twitter. And Aaron, if people want to get in touch with you, how might they do that?
You can find me on Twitter personally at PoisonTastyFish. Or if you're interested at all in my essays on narrative design in video games, you can head to @PushingB or pushingb.com, where you will find the full title, Pushing Buttons.
Nice. So that's it for another episode of the First 10 Minutes. Thank you all very much for listening, and we will catch you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.